Sorry, I'm late, just a smidge. My name's Dr. Fred Ray Lybrand, and I'm the proud dad of 5 homeschoolers who made it all the way through to college, and then college and graduated, and they're doing life and doing well. Proud and happy for all of them. So, if you're joining us, here's the game. This is definitely live. I'd love you to say hi, just so I make sure you can hear me. The Dark Lord runs the internet, so you never know. But what we want to do here is take your questions about homeschooling, about family, can be about life, anything that's supportive in this, beautiful audience of people who are endeavoring to take education seriously, take responsibility for it, and figure out how to invite their kids to be better prepared for life maybe than they were. That was certainly my goal. I was trying to hand off, Jody and I, a better heritage to the kids. So the format here, and I know there's a delay in the proverbial system, but the format here is I'm going to teach a little bit and share a thought or two, and then we're going to take your questions, and then run out of questions, we quit. If we keep having enough questions, I might keep going. You never know. So here we are in late April of 2023 at this stage. Lots of stuff going on nationally, but I'm not really wanting to focus on that as much as what goes on in your home and education. And there are a couple of things I want to mention to you. The first is something I've run into many times recently as I talk with parents about how to schedule, how to design, how to organize the day in terms of their kids getting work done. And what I'm noticing is that kids really are commonly allowed to work on something for long periods of time. They're not getting their work done. It'll go into the afternoon or even later. So think about this with me. There's a principle I learned some years ago about creativity, and it's called, I first learned it, it's called the limited palette. So like, I think Picasso had a blue period, and the idea was he wasn't blue, but he was writing, he was painting with the color blue and different shades of blue. Different artists have done this stuff, but you limit the palette. If you do that with music, first song I ever wrote the music for, which I know very little music, but when I learned this, I just had 3 chords on a guitar and I limited to those. And what happens is, here's principles. A principle: limits create focus. Limits create focus. So if you limit the amount of water that come out at the end of the hose, it focuses, right? A deadline tends to focus it. When JFK said, let's be on the moon by the end of the decade, 1969, it really focused the game in an entirely different way. Well, you parents are in the exact same spot. You have kids who are doing school, and if you don't create a limit to what they're doing, their ability to focus tends to go away, because if you have forever, you take forever. And focus can be a couple of things. One, it can be like the number of pages or the number of problems. That is a focus. That's a limit. Don't do more than that. Read this. Don't read more. If you want to read more, you can read in your free time. That's glorious. The other is time. How much time do you have to work on it? And this is what we discovered, and what I've found, that commonly parents, on the altar of trying to help their kids be happy, are taking away the kids' ability to focus, because what they're doing is they're just saying, here's the math and you can quit math when you're finished. And the child might drag that out for hours because it's a game and they're kind of winning the game, which is trying to get you to back off or change the game, or I don't know what it is. It's some kind of game. And you're caught in it too. It's not a bad thing. It's just a true thing. So here's the deal with focus. What you would do is you would put a limit of amount of time they can spend, let's say, on math. And they spend that amount of time on math, and they have a certain number of problems, and you want the game to be really fair. So make sure it's a number of problems they can do. And in that limit, let's say it's an hour. We did 2 spaced out, but by the time they're older. But if it's an hour, at the end of that hour, let's say they had 20 problems and they only did 15. What that means is the remaining 5 are done in the afternoon. And then they can take time, use up their afternoon, because that's another limit. Afternoon goes away, supper time, bedtime, etc. If you do it this way, what'll happen is your child will get focused and realize, if I get my 20 problems done in my hour, if that's the game, then I'm free in the afternoon. And so there's a consequence and a reward built into the system for them. But I'm going to tell you, if you just allow children to take forever, I mean, fine, if you want to unschool and allow them to watch whatever, and you have no direction or limits or focus, that's fine. You probably have something is going on. And if that's your philosophy, glory, go for it. I'm just saying that if you want to think about this in clearer ways and prep them for life, they're going to be in all kinds of careers, jobs, situations, challenges where they're going to have to focus. And focus is going to be generated by a time limit and an exact nature of a task. And so what you're doing is you're building in them a skill by helping them do this, at least some, maybe just one class. But that would be a key to focus. All right. So I'm going to pause here, and I want you to start sharing your questions. I do have one more thing I want to share about very briefly, but it's live. And so if you shoot questions, we'll think about them together. I know there's a delay in the system, so I'll wait for it. So as you type up your questions, and it may be on that topic, maybe on another one, I want to talk also about communication. So when you communicate with people, I was just on a podcast yesterday sharing this. And so when you communicate, I'm thinking especially with your kids, what you're wanting to do is you want to try to connect something they know and can understand to something they don't know and can't understand. And one of the ways you do that is with an analogy, an illustration, a metaphor. This is why speakers use them and other people. So if you'll actually do it this way, you'll find communication works dramatically well. So I give an illustration I have before. One day we were driving, I thought we were going somewhere for dinner, and Brooks was way in the back. So the 5-year-old at the time, I think, maybe he may have been 4. But Brooks is back there, and Jody next to me, she says, "Hey, Brooks has a question for you." And Brooks hollers from the back of the van, says, "Yeah, Daddy, where was I before I was born?" And I thought for a second, and I said, "So what'd you do today?" And he told me some things. And he said he drew something. And I said, "What'd you draw?" He said, "I drew Noah's Ark, animals." He described it to me. And so after he described this picture that he drew, I said, "Where was that picture before you drew it?" He thought for a second. He said, "Nowhere." I said, "I think that's exactly where you were before you were created, before you came into being." And that's a principle of creativity. Creativity is there's nothing and then there's something. But I was trying to use a picture of some type to communicate to him on that 4 or 5-year-old level an understanding of something that was a bit more complex. And by the way, as far as I know, he's grown now, but he got it even back then. So if you look at things, wanting to communicate with your children, think about an analogy or a picture that they can understand, that they relate to, that then connects them to something they may not understand. They may understand that they get tired, but don't understand that mommy gets tired. I'm making up something. So trying to think through an illustration about them when they get tired, and then how great it is to wake up refreshed or something like that. They can parallel and start understanding a little more empathetically because of that picture, what you offer them. All right, so communication and focus, those are my 2 thoughts. Questions? I know there's a delay. I know we're getting into a busy time of year. May is always crazy. But surely you've got something that you're wondering about, thinking about, wrestling with. So what questions, as the system delays, make sure my chat's on. What kind of questions do you have? Questions, family, learning, schedules, conflict, fun, communication. There's enough right there. Well, my favorite colors are Albanian Italian nationalists. My favorite color, spelling favorite in the European way. I'm no more have a favorite color than I have a favorite emotion. I learned a while ago that if you're biased towards emotions, it messes you up. So if you really think one emotion, like it's better to feel one way or another, because emotions are all there and they're all legitimate. So there's a real reason you might be upset, a real reason you might be irritated, a real reason you might be joyful. And if you live and magnify the good ones and then diminish the others, you don't get the contrast and the variety and depth. So I'm kind of the same way with color. I like them all when they're used in the right way. I'm not that color biased, as it were. Conflict, fun, communication. Conflict, fun, communication. Oh, that's what I wrote, I guess. Family learning schedules. When I go in there twice. So, the way this live game works, if you don't have questions, I mean, you may be hanging out and listening, and I may need a little more critical mass. Like last week, I popped into Chat GPT. What kind of questions are homeschooling schoolers asking? And that was quite interesting. And I can do that sort of thing, but I like to answer questions. Usually they're around scheduling, they're around math, they're around problems, they're around challenges. Here's a question. Let's see what Christy's got for us. What suggestions do you have for helping older children school, 10 and 7, while dealing with babies? Yeah, this is these littles are quite a challenge. I really ought to get Jody in here. So a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. I can tell you what we did. First of all, I think you need to be genuinely realistic about the challenge and just not over stress about it, because 2-year-olds and 6 months old are not that easy to direct and organize, as it were. But what you're really trying to do with your kids and homeschooling is you're trying to provide a context in which they study, and it doesn't have to be perfectly quiet. You can get them addicted to quiet, and then they're telling everybody to shush during their SAT. That won't work. So, or whatever test they have. So what Jody did in part was she tried to organize at certain times when she knew the baby would be down was a special moment for schooling, especially as she was reading to the kids and doing narration. But also what we commonly did is we would get the kids occupied on the floor with some activity that they could do. I remember Brooks liked to work puzzles. So he's a little guy working puzzles, and he feels like he's kind of doing school, but they're up at the table and Jody's helping them, or they're working on whatever they need to in some quiet way. If it's too noisy, they may go out of a room if they're going flashcards and they have to talk. But by and large, we tried to train everybody to say, when we're in school, we're all going to be active with some activity. We're not bothering each other. They're doing school. They're playing with the things they play with, and this is part of our school time. Otherwise, you match school up into downtime for the 2-year-old and the 6-month-old. If you go through life and just let them interrupt constantly, that's not putting school on the value level I would argue it needs to be. So the priority is school, and so you have to train the 2-year-olds, the young ones, the littles, not to interrupt. Just like if mom and dad are talking, you want to teach these kids how to interrupt appropriately. We used to have the kids put a hand on our arm and just wait, and we knew they were there, and then we'd finish the thought, and then we give attention to them. If you do it the other way around, you just start making it all about the babies and all about the children, and that kind of orientation will not serve family health really well. Anyway, hope that's a bit of a help. All right, so here's GM or G. Hi, what are your suggestions to do hands-on science experiments at home? That is such a great question. The last one was too, but this is one that is kind of tricky because I, as a kid, loved experiments. I had boxes of all kinds of stuff. I had chemistry sets, and I had transformers, and electricity, and battery. I did all kinds of stuff, little electric motors, all kinds of crazy stuff. So the problem is science proper comes in this sequence. You learn math, which is the language of science. And then you learn physics, which is how these things that move and bump into each other affect things. And then you have chemistry, which is an interaction at a atomic, level, essentially, creating certain results. And then biology itself is the combination of physics and chemistry. But in order to do physics, you need to know calculus. That's the math up to. And so as a result, I want to call it real science. Gets to be something later. But at this stage, I would say some of this is guided by their interest. We did things. I don't know. We did Mentos rockets and out of bottles, and the kids eventually started filmed some of their stuff, and they'd build something or create something. It's sort of like anything, building a deck, or helping with some building project or hanging pictures for that fact, or any kind of science projects are more about curiosity and the discovery of how does it work? How does it work? How does this world work? And that shows up in literature and language and communication and making friends, etc. So my thought would be, I wouldn't make it a science thing. I would make it more a curiosity learning thing that has broad applications. So it's not just the science world. It could be, as I said, as much as anything, the friendship world. How does that work? Because that's what science is doing. Science is asking the question, how does it work with our best understanding? Because it's always about, moves down to the engineers who then make it work. So we didn't do science properly that way. Then again, we raised a bunch of writers, not as many scientists, I'd say. Well, I have 2 programmers, so they had some interest in it, but they didn't pursue STEM exactly, mathematics and economics. So this may be an experiment you get to play out yourself, but I think it's a great question that we have to think through and settle. The way we approached it was variety, fun to do, but not exactly a part of the curriculum. Some things we'd buy would be science stuff. But we did lots of that. But we also might have them play chess against each other when they got older for how games work, or strategy games. Anyway, hope that's useful. My 7-year-old, Jessica says, was doing copy work for some time. Then he wanted to do free writing, but his writing was 2 to 3 sentences. Should we keep doing copy work, or should I encourage him to expand his thoughts? Well, if you're copying good stuff, that can expand their thoughts too. So don't give up on copy work. 7 is okay. Here's my experience. My experience in teaching people writing was a sharp 9-year-old and up could really do good writing. An 8-year-old can be in that game. 7 is a little early. They may be gifted or motivated or whatever else, but it's a bit of a challenge. Just because of even just dexterity, with writing it's all a challenge. So I would just say you're going to have to figure it out with your child. 2 to 3 sentences probably enough, unless it's taking a long time, then that's a little slow. So I guess here are the 3 things I would do. I'd mix it up. I'd put copy work in there and get different types of copy work. It might be Bible, it might be great literature, it might be a passage from a book he likes, it might be anything. So the copy work is good practice of language and hooking it up. The second thing I would do is I would let him, let him tell you a story and you write it down. So you show him that if you'll do that, rotate these things in and let him, or some storyline or some description, whatever you want to do, and you write a page or two, you're teaching him that it's in his brain and he just needs to get it out on the paper, right? And then the third thing is still mix it in and let him do 2 or 3 sentences, or figure the number of sentences you want him to do, and get him to reach a little further. Honestly, at that age, just writing 10 separate sentences might be good. It doesn't have to be an exact story. It just could be, honestly, write down 10 items and make a sentence involving each item, but not the same sentence. This is a fish, this is a duck, this is a cat. We don't want that. But just that practice. Look, all practice is generally helpful, the way humans take feedback. So, Jessica, I hope that helps a little. Copy work from good literature is huge. Yeah, I agree. It naturally teaches them to read, write, spell, and learn context. Keep up with the copy work. I would also say mixing it up too. I remember in college, I read the New Testament so much, I started writing like Paul, and they were very complicated sentences. And that was fine. Or like our translation of Paul, let's be accurate. So you do want to give them some different voices, because you can get caught up in one way of sounding, and ultimately you want them to find their own voice, don't you? But that's going to come from play, just like with kids. They pretend they're somebody, they try to sound like them, mimic them. I'm the the monster, or I'm the happy thing, or I'm Tinkerbell, or whatever they play, and so they're playing with that. So the same with copy work. Mix it up some with different authors, and I think you'll find it hooks their brain up in a really nice way. So John Arum said, for sure. Oh, on the copy work. Yeah, on the literature. Yeah, mixing up. Yeah, exactly. I find that just in life, the more references you can give people, the more they have to think with. And what I mean by that, frame of reference or experiences. So it's not so much planning a field trip. I would say is what you want to do is, if you can think this way, plan a field experience. So they're going on a trip and be at the museum or something, but you can make something more of it. Like I've said, we would make a movie of an experience. So we'd watch the movie, like I remember watching Harry Potter because it was popular at the time and all their friends were watching it. And so we watched it, and then we went and had nachos and we debriefed it by debating, hey, what was good in this movie? What did it teach that was good? What did it teach this was bad? What happened to the bad guys? What happened to the good guys? How did it turn out? What do we Librans affirm, and what do we maybe question? So it became more of a whole thing than just a trip. So, at least in our experience, that was certainly a strategic way to go. Well, that kind of thing is the same with literature. Different types of literature, different types of people, conversations with different things, different topics. Getting out and knowing nothing about politics is no better than getting out of high school and all you know is politics. Like, let's mix it up. I met someone yesterday, a younger person. We were talking, not that young, but I mentioned Thoreau's point that most people live lives of quiet desperation and they die with the song still in them. And he had never heard that. And he went to Texas A&M, so maybe they don't do literature there. I don't know. Just kidding you. So it's that thing, that variety of experiences, that variety of references, so they can look at life and things from a variety of angles. Really crucial. And I think good literature, plays that exact role. What else is on your mind? We got time. It's so interesting to watch this world um, try to figure out education. It's really strange because in the public sector, the tendency is to throw pseudo ideas and more money at things. So pseudo ideas are false ideas, and they come from pseudo intellectuals who are false intellectuals. They think they're smart, but they really don't actually understand either how we got to where we are in history. They've misunderstood it. They have a false history they put on it, or they don't understand cause and effect to know how things are going to go in the future. This has been a big debate, like with the whole language versus phonics. I'm a big fan of phonics. If you study it, you would be too. People still stick to it because they want kids to feel good about reading, like they're reading sooner, they're learning words. But cause and effect, we know if you learn the phonetic game, then you can decode any word. And that's awesome because it's also hooking your brain up properly. Some literature I've read argues that we can easily create certain kinds of challenges mentally by not teaching phonics, by teaching another thing. We can almost generate some forms of like dyslexia, etc. I'd have to look this up. Don't hold me to it, but I remember from some of my research some years ago that this was one of the challenges because it wasn't cooperating with the way the brain works. And things like that genuinely and easily can happen. So, could you talk about your family experience with the Robinson vocabulary flashcard stuff? Now, that is a question. So, our Robinson flashcard, I know we did it, and eventually we changed out some of the vocabularies we researched it because some of it was a bit archaic and wasn't as quite focused on the SAT or some things we were concerned about in the later years. But basically, all we would do is we would trade out um, vocabulary for reading for usually it's just a day. And so they would practice on the words and then finally we'd test them. So it might go 2 days, but we made it part of the reading game because like the Romans had this phrase, something close to verbis sunt animo indices, which means words are the indices or the index, of the mind. So everybody's big about we think in pictures, but we actually think in words too. And so words, the more vocabulary add, the more categories, the more ways you can organize and index information. So, but that's how we did it. We didn't exactly make it an add-on to torture the kids after class, but they get through a reading book and then we do the reading vocabulary or maybe the vocabulary before. I honestly need to ask Jody, and I hollered at her and I don't know where she is. So, but that's got to be a good start. I hope. Just jumping on, so this may have been discussed, but thoughts on LA curriculum or history and science other than using books. Yeah, we did talk about this a little bit, and you can go back and listen to it. But I think all these things are fine as you want to add variety and experiences to the kids. I don't, in our thinking, we weren't trying to make it exactly a curriculum thing because a lot of times people pretend they're doing science, but it's not really good science because they don't know the math and they don't know the physics and the chemistry or what's going on. It's still interesting and it's fascinating. They learn a lot of facts about science or how we understand things or what quartz is made of, that kind of thing. So anything that you can do, even in history, visiting sites, uh, understanding the nature of it. I know just going to Israel, at times I've been there, how much it helped me understand the Bible in terms of the geography of what I was looking at. I remember I used to think where Jesus threw the demons into the pigs, they jumped off a cliff and crashed in the water. But you get out there and it's a steep bank and they ran down it, which is pretty interesting to the story because I think pigs could have turned around and run out, but they didn't. They drowned. So the geography really helps. So anything you can do that's an experience and fun, you add all that in, I think that's great. Making it part of a curriculum, a subject, that's not the way we think about education. We think about skill development, and that reading, writing, and math, those skills are golden. And so the skills you want to keep using and working on. Their interests are a different story. Man, if they love science like I did, oh my gosh, third grade, the first time I read a book about microbes, I had to ask to be excused to go to the bathroom. I was so excited. It was so embarrassing. But then in, not too long, I was able to get a microscope and other stuff. And a lot of this pours around people's interest. And I think exposing them to a variety of things to find out what, lights the fire is awesome. So, broad question. I know. Any advice about prepping a student for high school? My son will be a freshman this fall. I need John or Robin. Is this prepping them for going into high school, a public school, or prepping them for a high school level in homeschooling? So I'll kind of answer both as best I can. I'm sorry, I'm having allergy challenges. I know this is obnoxious. So prepping for high school shouldn't be a prep. You just are continually doing the system. And so what you're doing with education and homeschool is just constantly improving. We're just learning more math. We're learning to read more challenging things and a little faster. We're improving our comprehension. Our writings get a little more sophisticated. We get a little older, we start working on essays and other things, sharing our opinion on topics, etc. So it's a constant improvement. As far as if you're shifting into public school, the most important thing is going to actually be how they handle friendships. And that can be a challenge because the way we like to say it is you'll never be like the people you don't hang around. Like never. You'll never be like the people you don't hang around. If you don't hang around drug dealers, you won't be like them. If you don't hang around smart people, you won't be like them. If you don't hang around spiritual people, you won't be like them. Don't worry. So getting them prepped to understand the importance of the friends that they really connect with and hang out with, that's going to be the key. Because if they'll look at those people and say, is that how I want to turn out? That's going to be the game. So by and large, there are exceptions, but not enough to mention. But I hope that helps. Let's see if I got a little more clarification here. Yeah. Okay. So they got this. No homeschool who'll be taking 2 shop classes. Oh, that's cool. But all core at home as usual. Yeah. So the shop classes, something like that. There are 2 things. One is the friendship, but the other is inviting them to really learn how to submit to someone in authority that's not mom and dad. So it's another chance for whoever's leading the shop. You really just want to learn to do it their way first, and then you can improve it. But learning to follow instructions, pay attention, follow exact directions. That's how they learn. That's how we learn anything at first. It's like we learn to paint by numbers, let's say, and then we can be more inventive and creative. People, Mozart learned the scale before he wrote Magic Flute. So I'm just saying that would be another thing as terms of a mindset you want to do. The other thing you can do with him that'll be really cool, we found with our kids as they age, an older man taught me this, is I'd go in and lay on the bed with kids late in the day. Because if I try to talk to them during the day, they're busy, friends and all the rest, not so good. But right towards bedtime, a little before, just hanging out, kind of everybody, nobody's bothering each other. They're ready to debrief the day, and really good conversations come up. And so that would be a great moment. You can ask, hey, what'd you learn in shop today? You could do that as soon as they get out, but they're probably hungry and want to do something else. If you ask them later in the day, what was one of your best lessons? I think you'll find that golden. Let's see. We're trying to figure out what extracurricular activities or extra activities our kids can get involved in. You mentioned chess. That's actually a great idea. What other things did your kids do? So with chess, they played each other instead of reading. We subbed it out, and if you win, you get to keep playing chess. If you lose, you had to go finish your reading for whatever period of time. And all I was trying to do with that, just let me mention it, I was wanting them to really learn how to think 2 or 3 moves ahead. I've found in this world, if you can think 2 or 3 moves ahead of anybody, you're golden. I mean, you're truly golden. It's genuinely quite amazing. And so if you find anything like that you can use inside the game to learn some principle, that's awesome. Extracurricular activities. So generally, the Greeks had some of this figured out. There's the gymnasium and the arts and the academic sciences type stuff. And there are different ways that this has been discussed. But basically, physical activity, athletics can be a thing. And we wanted to let all the kids experience some of that. It got to where with our athleticism, we weren't going to have 5 Tim Tebows. So we, encouraged them. If they found a sport they love, fine. But for the most part, that wasn't exactly our thing. They all played a sport, soccer or baseball or something, at least one season, so they knew what it was like. Our boys were heavily involved in scouts. It was a very independent scout troop they were involved in, and had its own camp place, etc. So some of the values and things that we shared with those folks really were a match. Scouting is all over the map now. And I'm not sure. I mean, they're in bankruptcy, so I don't know what's going on with scouting. But that was a thing. Youth group provided a lot of activities, everything from, classes to snow skiing, to friendships, to hangout time. Anything you can pursue out there. But the kids took art classes for a time. Some of them, maybe, I think all of them, we tried to get some music. Especially the more interested ones, piano and violin, I think. So any of those things are great, but a lot of this is just time to play with friends, experiment, do stuff, learn how to not be bored on your own. Sometimes I think we fill up our lives so much, there's no room for a person to really discover who they are and what they like. Answered that one. So let's see. We have your writing curriculum. Okay, cool. So the writing curriculum, I'm not sure. I'm glad you have it. Is there a question? But the strange thing about what our curriculum, the writing course, does compared to pretty much everything out there is really more like technical writing. In fact, it all to me sounds like ChatGPT, what they've done in their programming. So I can take posts. I've done this experimentally that ChatGPT does, and it's good and it makes sense, but it's not interesting. And what our course does is teaches the importance of interestingness, effective writing, not just correct. That's stage 1. You want to get it right. Stage 2 is your own voice, your own unique way of putting things and arranging things. Maybe it figures it out someday, but I think the way it's organized, it's all about doing it correct. Correct writers don't win Nobel Prizes or Pulitzers or much of anything. I mean, they win academic articles, don't get me wrong. But in the writing course, what we're aiming for is learning to tune into the ear and to write by ear, and how it sounds if it were read aloud. And what that has done, I can tell in our kids and, the zillions of students we've had, is it helps them find their voice, and they write in a more poetic way. The very nature of the writing just has more. It's more musical. It has rhythm to it, and it has nice phrasing and nice balance, especially as they get good at it. So that's what we were shooting for. You mentioned ramping up essays in high school. Yes, answering my previous question. So I was just letting you know. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, so ramping up essays. Let me just say for people who might be new to this, my understanding and way I look at essays is I wouldn't really start them until they're about 14. So you need a frontal cortex here and abstraction. You're sharing opinion, other stuff. And they're really kicking in by 14. A little more experience with arguing. They'll start arguing around 12 because that's part of the progress of growth, challenging things and arguing the logic of it, but they're not very good at it, as as a rule of thumb. But essays, you're trying to share their opinion. What we learn with essays, they're sharing an opinion about a topic. What we learn with essays and what we do in the essay course with the writing course is try to get them to work on an essay maybe over a period of 5 weeks. Maybe not every day, but like Thursdays and Fridays might be essay days, and they're writing an initial one, and they're going to rewrite it, and they're going to learn to add illustrations to it and do a little better with 5 paragraphs. And you keep going through this process to where they write a really good essay. And at that moment, they'll know from then on what a good essay should look like. They've got it. They've totally got it. And as a result, they will know what they're trying to do for the rest of forever in terms of an essay. Now, each professor, especially if you go to college, they may have their own twist, but for the most part, what we found, I have 2 kids, their professors came to them after their first essay and said, can we copy this and give it out to our freshman class, the rest of my classes, because this is what I want. And most kids just don't know that, but it comes through practicing, getting that one right. And it might not be their first one. Maybe you let them play with it a little bit as they keep learning. All right, I've got a few more minutes. What else? By the way, you're welcome to share. I'll comment and cheer for you. If you share a little tip that you found really helpful, something that came in handy for you all. Like, for us, one of the things I would share is we wrestled with screen time. I wasn't big on Game Boys or anything like that. We didn't have that, but they did have computers, and they did some computer games and other things, with some screen time, maybe some TV. So what we did is we had them. It was like you get 1 minute for every 2 minutes of reading or something like that. So outside of school, if you read an hour, maybe you get 30 minutes, maybe 15. It's been a little bit, whatever the formula would be. And that was on the weekend. But you could pile up some more either screen time you could use on a computer or TV, with approved subjects, to watch or play with. So I'm just saying there's a tip that we found that worked. Let's see what else I've got. Any more questions or tips? I know there's a delay in the system, so we have to wait a sec. I will shamelessly promote the book behind me. It's not out yet. It's coming soon. Stay tuned. Enjoying Problems. It's especially for entrepreneurial people. I know a lot of you are. So I'm going to make sure you have access to it. But it's that book is really kind of a lifetime of me trying to wrestle through looking for a more universal problem-solving model. So everybody has all their different models between brainstorming and smelling lavender and it sparking a thought, or mixing things together, or debate, or an exact problem-solving model of analyze and then brainstorm, etc. But I've found I think a much better way to go that I've taught the United States Air Force and businesses and schools and other places as I've refined it over the years. And so that book is going to lay that out. I think you're going to find it really useful. All right. Come on. One more question. I guess this is why Joe Rogan has someone sit across from him and smoke a cigar and talk. We don't have the delay in the system. All right. One last question. And listen, these are great. As homeschoolers, I did not really teach my kids to, quote, study. We just work daily together. I'm a bit worried about that. Not that now that my son's entering high school, I think you're going to be surprised. I get it. But, Laura was one of the ones that Laura went to Abilene Christian and worked for the St. Louis Cowboys, St. Louis Cardinals. But she at Abilene Christian, I remember the first semester, she would do this, but the first semester, I remember her calling us and saying, "Thank you so much for homeschooling us, how you did." I said, "Why is that?" She said, "Well, we're at finals and all my friends are panicked and are cramming and studying. And I'm just ready," because she learned to do the work every day. And that's what homeschooling is doing, is teaching them to do the work every day. And what I stress to the kids, if you go to college, high school is the same way, do the work every day. If you do your homework, then you like going to class, and then you speak up in class, and then you wind up getting a review. You did the homework, it's reviewed in class. And so enough reviews and your brain's going to remember it. It's a wholly more effective way to go. So I think you're going to wind up being surprised that they'll do fine. But by the same token, a lot of life is figuring it out, So some of it is they're going to have to teach themselves. This is education, is learning how to learn. And that means maybe you have to learn how to study. Maybe you're going to have to learn a little more about how to manage your time. Welcome to humanity. That's what we all do. We just have to learn something. And so learning starts out where you're not very good and then you get better. It starts out that you're curious, but it's frustrating because you can't do it instantly. So I think there's a watch and see, and then deal with it as it comes along. Do you have the ideas on how to cope with widespread ability in a group? No. I think this is inherently one of the problems that we run into with diversity in the game. So what a one-room schoolhouse would do would have the more advanced students help the others. We did that in our school. So the older kids could help the younger ones, etc. But the key was everyone was doing their work. And so we weren't actually, we were providing a context, and we could let everybody grab it at their level. So I've mentioned the way we did Bible studies. I'd do it around a question, and then we'd discuss the question, and then we'd get to an answer. So I can say this, and that worked for ages 5 to 16 or whatever. So if you actually engage questions in the process, it can tend to hit at every level. But by and large, there's a pretty good reason why you can't teach, if you try to teach math to people that can do calculus down to algebra half, it's just going to be frustrating because the advanced kids won't be challenged and the slower kids won't be, get the attention they need. This is why the solution to education, when it fails, is to get a tutor, because that one-on-one individualized training is where the key is. Mass training, not so good. Groups, when it's Socratic, and that's why I said questions, where we're interacting about questions and discussing things, that can work for the group. But when that widespread ability and you're trying to teach them, you're in a challenge. That's why even in colleges or other places, they have prerequisites. You just have to have a certain number of classes that you pass before you can get into this next one. Hope that helps. Didn't sound very helpful. Hi, Dr. Libran. Is copy work enough to prepare for your course? Yeah, so all they need to to be able to do the writing course is they need to be able to write. They need some manual dexterity. Sometimes, dysgraphia and something typing, that's a whole nother conversation. But in general, they need to be able to write their letters and it's legible pretty much. So I'd say that's key. And the other key is really their reading. If they're reading okay, like if they can use language and talk, that's a help. But if they can read adequately, they're going to write similar, or stretching towards that reading level they are. So I'd say that's it. And of course, the way we do the writing course is the goal would be to go through it every year. I think all our kids went through it 5 or 6 times, because every time through, the way we designed it, it's a new course. You get a point and you work on it, and then you go back and listen. I didn't even hear that one. That's amazing. And the examples we do are open-ended, so it'll be a different writing experience for different levels of students. So it's that Herodotus thing, that you can't step in the same river twice, right? Or the way I said, you can't bathe with the same bar soap twice, because it's always changing. Well, the student is too. So when they go through the writing course again later, they get a little more, and they refine a little more, and again later refine a little more. So one of the tricks is you don't have to think about getting it all up front. Just get what you can. Kind of like how you eat chicken, eat the parts you can eat, throw the bones away. It's not a big deal. Go into this thing saying, what can they at this stage grasp? Let them grasp it, let them practice it, and later do something a bit different. Testing, thoughts on testing, and I'm probably gonna have to let you go after this. We're fixing to, it's a Southernism, be out of, we're traveling. In fact, Friday won't work. Next Friday will not happen. So maybe a disappointment, but it's just the way it goes. So I won't have access. So on testing, I'm conflicted about testing, and I think for really good reasons. So we avoided testing early on because I didn't want the kids to get labeled or stuck in some kind of fixed mindset of whether they were smart or dumb or whatever the test told them. And yet at some point you do need to start testing them, one, so they can learn to take tests, because they're going to have that in the future most likely. And two, you need to measure where they are. So I guess what I'd say is in our experience, we didn't obsess on much testing until they were more like, I'd say 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. But from then on, we did start regularly doing testing with math. Reading, we didn't exactly, we would test vocabulary, I think, but more to the point with reading, we would get them at the end of the day or the end of the reading time. It varied, sometimes with each other, sometimes with us, or sometimes at supper, to recount what they read that day. So that process of reading and then recounting it and explaining to someone drives it in their mind, and you can find out if they're really comprehending. Because if they say stuff that's just gobbledygook, you want to go back and get the book and read it and see what's going on. Because if they're not comprehending, they're either have a challenge that's beyond them, or they're shucking and jiving and tricking you. It's a scam. So they're just running their eyes over the page and not really reading, because reading has got to be comprehension. Got to be. Oh, good. Glad that was helpful, Natasha. All right, gang. This has been fun. I hope you found it helpful. Again, next week won't happen, but we'll see you the week after, and bring your questions, and I'll try to teach you a little more, and we'll see what's out there. Please pass this along, mention it, the YouTube channel, and see if this isn't helpful to some folks and friends. We have lots of material, all kinds of material, and I think you'll find it useful. People tend to. So anyway, it was a good time. I hope you'll have an awesome weekend.